Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning, and welcome to this exhibition of paintings by James Bishop. We are thrilled to have this work here in the gallery. This is our first solo exhibition with James Bishop, and we've included a few of his works in exhibitions at the gallery before, but we are privileged not only to have this group of paintings here, but also to have the artist with us. This is James's first trip to New York since 1987, I believe.
No, 2000.
2000.
Yeah.
Okay. First solo show in New York since 1987. And we want to thank John Franco and Anne-Marie Verna for their support and great assistance in helping us put this exhibition together. So today we'll keep it rather light, and we welcome questions for James about the show. There's no chronology in the exhibition, but the exhibition brings together paintings from the early 1960s until the mid-1980s, when the paintings on canvas end with the very last painting that we have here that James painted, which is being loaned to us from the Art Institute of Chicago, the yellow painting here. So in this room, which we'll start talking in because it's the largest room, there's no real chronology, although we'll move through a couple of other rooms where the earliest paintings are, and then some later paintings and some paintings on paper. So thank you for joining us. Welcome. And we'll begin, I think, just talking a little bit about the paintings and your process. And we welcome questions to keep the conversation running. So please welcome James Bishop.
Thank you for inviting me.
Perhaps, James, you can tell us a little bit about when you started painting and the approach to the paintings here.
When did I start painting? Yes. I went to art school in 1950 at Washington University, which I never regretted because it was a very conservative school. And we began by drawing plaster cubes and spheres and rounding them and that kind of thing. And then in the next year, we went on to drawing from the model. Actually, in the first year, we also had a very Bauhaus sort of design kind of course in the afternoon with a wonderful man named Werner Dravis, who had been at the Bauhaus. So that was the introductory of the first year. The second year, we drew from the model in the morning and then began to paint a little bit in the afternoon by setting up a still life and painting that. And I have never regretted having, in a sense, started at the beginning like this. I think it's like learning to play the piano or tennis or anything else. You have to start somewhere. And I think the indispensable thing is seeing, which drawing is the very best tool that I can imagine to do that. When I was in third year, or no, actually it was in the second year still, we had a project where we were to go to the museum and copy a painting, not quite the same size, usually smaller, but in black and white, to see how we could translate the color values into black and white. And I chose painting a Fontaine Latour called The Two Sisters, which I saw again a few years ago in Lausanne, and I still find it very interesting. And that was the third year then was pretty much all painting, but we still went on drawing. And it was, I think it's very different from the way students are now. I had a little job filling in for somebody at the School of Visual Arts a couple of years ago, and I found the students very different from my time. Sometimes someone would stand up, rip his drawing in half, and storm out in tears. We thought it was all very serious. And we were very anxious for the latest art news to arrive and see what was going on in New York, because in 1950 a lot was going on in New York. You'd see the newest de Kooning and the newest this, that, and the other thing.
And following your time in St. Louis, then you came to New York and spent some time at Black Mountain.
But I went to Black Mountain in the third year at Washington, because I knew about the school, and I knew about I met someone who was there and said, "Why don't you come? You know, the school was falling apart rapidly, and you could just go and they give anybody a scholarship. And I was also very interested in the person who was teaching there, Esteban Vicente, who was a Spanish painter, and I don't know if he's very well known in New York today. He's been dead for several years, but he made a lot of collages, and I was very interested in the collages, rather more than his paintings. And I sometimes think that I have some relation to collage. I sometimes make some that are really, pasted paper and that kind of thing, but I think that the look of it may be what I'm sometimes trying to get. I'm trying to get paint to look like it was pasted paper. And I think I always knew this, but I discovered it in the catalog for the show at Bottrop, Munich, and Chicago. Michael Senf from Munich wrote a piece in which he went into that very well. And I had this strange feeling of having always known it, but never quite realized it. It's an excellent piece. It's the best thing that was written about the work on paper.
This group of paintings starts with the earliest painting from 1962, but you left for France in 1957. Is that right? You want to tell us a little bit about your move to France?
I thought I had enough money to stay for 6 months. And I thought, I'll see how far I can get. So I didn't reach Istanbul. I got stopped in Greece, but that was quite enough. And oddly enough, then I realized I didn't really want to go back to the United States. And I was sort of wondering between, I had gone through Paris, you see, stayed for a couple of weeks, and it was a very terrible period because the war with Algeria was going on, and people were very nervous, and anytime a paratrooper passed by on the street, everyone would look around like that. They were expecting it to be invaded at any minute, and everything was very gray and filthy, and but somehow I was very attracted to it and the way people behaved and the people that I met and that kind of thing. And the other alternative was Italy, which of course meant ice cream and coffee and piazzas and a lot of art. But I chose Paris and didn't come back to the United States for 9 years. And then in '66, I had the first show at Fishback, which I would never have gotten to if Donald Dole hadn't come to see me, because John Ashbery had told him he should see me, and then an English couple who had 3 paintings were also friends of his, and he saw those, and so he came and said, I'm going to open a gallery with Marilyn Fishback in September, and would you like to come and have a show and be part of it? So I had 4 shows with Fishback every 2 years. And then after that I had, I think the Clock Tower was the next year, in '73. That also was it's a very special space. I loved it when I first saw it. I was the 3rd show there. I had a show of works on paper with Rosa Esmond, and I had another one with David Neumann, who's gone back to Sweden. And I think that was it. Because by that time, you see, I was having shows in Paris. I had a gallery in Paris, a very good one, with a man who was totally devoted to painting and color.
Well, there's 2 paintings in this room which begin to span the work that are here. In the room around the corner, we're too large of a crowd to move in there right now. There is a painting from 1962 and also a painting from 1965. Like I mentioned, the show is not hung chronologically, but in this room the work spanned from 1967 up to 1986, which is the last painting that James painted. So perhaps we can walk over to the corner with the 2 paintings which span from 67 to 86 and talk a little bit about those 2 paintings, if you would. So maybe we start with this painting. This painting is titled Early from 1967. Is there a reason for the title? And perhaps you can speak a little bit about the way the canvas is constructed. Part of it's unpainted. Can I?
galleries find it useful to have a title. You can't just endlessly untitled. It leads to more confusion than there is anyway. And I don't know quite why I call that early. It's not particularly early. I mean, I'd been painting for about 10 years or so. But this particular white canvas is odd because it's the only one that I ever found that has only one coat of primer. Other prepared canvases, somebody in Belgium painted the white part. I only painted the green part. But it behaves like paper, which is what I like about it, the fact that there's only one coat of primer. If you have two coats, then your paint that you put on tends to get a little bit more shiny and palpable and things like that. Whereas it will soak into this white canvas. And I'm not quite sure why I was interested in it. I think perhaps I was interested in, white is the strongest color optically. And I don't know that I was interested in trying to fight it, but I was just wondering what you could do along with it in a square format almost always. Very few rectangles. Very early were rectangles, but very few after that. And I discovered that this size, when I could first afford to buy a roll of this canvas, it was 2 meters. And by stretching it like that, I used every square centimeter. And what I discovered once it was stretched was that it's a little bit higher than me, and it's a little bit wider than this. And I think that almost everything that happens in the divisions in all these paintings is based on the human scale. I don't mean that it's necessary this or this, but that's why I like to see them hung as low as possible to try to suggest that the idea that they're not easel paintings on the wall, but that they have a relationship to the person. And of course, some people are taller than others, but you can see if it does anything.
And can you tell us a little bit about this painting here from 1986?
Yes, it was the last painting that I did on canvas and stretched. And I had always made a lot of work on paper, and I guess in a sense it took over. I was not interested in making a large painting anymore. I was interested, a lot of them are about this size, which is a perfectly respectable size, but then they seem to get smaller and smaller, and so now very often things are sort of like that. And I find, however, that I found this size I could see it. And other things then look too small or too big, but this seemed real. And there's certain sizes of paper that are the same thing. It's simply that you're looking down the wrong end of the telescope. But I think it also has to do with age, because I don't have the energy to make painting like that anymore. It's fortunate that I don't want to. I'm not terribly unhappy about it. But I'm very happy when I'm just sort of doing like that. Also, I found that making a painting, I usually had to know more or less what I wanted to do. Now, depending on how they dried and things like that, sometimes it was not, I was surprised, and sometimes it was better and sometimes worse. But with paper, perhaps because of the speed that you find yourself going sometimes, you can surprise yourself much more often. And I sometimes make something on paper that I don't understand for months, and I like that.
Speaking of paintings on paper, you decided to include 4 small works, which you saw when you came into the exhibition, which are small paintings on paper in gray, which relate to one painting here much earlier.
Simply because they would go with that, and that's practically the only case where a group of works on paper were really closely related to a painting. The show that I had in Chicago in 2008 was at the Art Institute, was works on paper, but with the 3 paintings that they own, which is this, and that. Oddly enough, Chicago is all together here. But that show was, I don't know, quite a lot of work on paper. And I'm still doing it.
And there's a room around the corner. Perhaps we can go into that room also to speak a little bit about what would some curators would call a subsection of your paintings and the brown paintings. So perhaps we can move into the room there and speak a little bit about those paintings, and we'll welcome some questions from you as well.
The thing about most of these paintings is that they've never been shown in New York, and 2 or 3 have never been shown anywhere. So that at least is
Something interesting.
Gives us some excuse for doing this.
So I'm personally very fond of the installation in this room. I'm thrilled with the exhibition because there's a very different feel in each room. And when we were installing the exhibition, we joked in the afternoon because it almost installed itself. The paintings sort of decided where they wanted to be and who they wanted to be next to. This room, similar to the painting that we saw titled Early, 2 of the paintings in this room have a blank canvas on half of the paintings, and then 2 are completely filled in their construction. And I think it's interesting to see those in comparison with each other. The painting behind everyone here is one interesting painting in the entire exhibition, and perhaps, James, you can tell us a little bit about that painting. It reveals itself a little bit more intensely than the other architectures in the paintings.
Yes, altogether I made about 16 or 17 paintings like that, using that same configuration, but in different ways, where this would overlap this way or it would overlap that way and that kind of thing. And this is the most washy, disheveled, loosest of all. Some are almost invisible, and then some are in between. And I found that I never made quite a large group of paintings of that. I don't know where most of them are, but I do know where a few of them are. And this was always kept because it was so loose, sort of an exception to the rule.
And this painting,
there is no explanation.
This painting is
stop here.
Sure.
No, I mean stop. There's no explanation.
Right. Are there questions for James about? This is 1972. And the other 3 paintings in the room are 1974.
That group ran from about 1971 to, I think 74 was the last.
Are there other questions? I have a question about this painting because it's different than the other 3 in this room, whereas this has a red underpainting, which you begin to see as you've laid the other paint over. Do you want to speak about the difference in when you layered paint? And
most of them have a coat of one color underneath and then a second coat over it. You'd be surprised that some paints, some colors are more transparent than you imagine. And I have a rather curious technique that I discovered in 1963, I think, rather like by an accident. They're painted flat on the floor, and I have a coffee tin like this with paint that becomes very liquid, but maybe mixed with turpentine. And so then I would fill in an area that I wanted to cover with this brush with a lot of very liquid paint. And then by moving it around, I would have more paint here than there and create a kind of strange sort of spatial space. And you can usually see what's underneath. Sometimes there'll be a spot or a... But almost every time that something was written about them, they said that I was pouring the paint, which is, of course, totally impossible. You'd have splashes everywhere, even if you were right down like that. I think it must be some Pollock syndrome that's in the critic's mind. They cannot imagine that you haven't poured the paint on here because of the sunning. But no, it's simply put on with a big brush. I'm a very conservative painter. I don't invent a lot of strange things. But I found that very, very interesting to work like that. In some cases, part of a painting will be done that way, and the other part will be simply brushed. The rather pale gray painting in the other room is partly one and partly the other, and so is the yellow painting next to it. So it depends on what you want to do and what you think you can do and what you try to do and so on.
Well, good. Thank you very much. Are there questions from people in the audience?
Your inspiration.
Yeah, she's wondering if you have.
Go and look in the other room. There's a little painting there that I kept for years because I was always very fond of it. And then finally somebody really wanted it. And then the other painting is, I still find a very odd painting. And that also is in the right place now.
Yeah. Did you have aspirations and inspirations from other artists or?
Oh, hundreds. Yes. Were I to list all my influences, we'd be here until... I love painting. I love to look at other people's paintings, and sometimes I guess you just pick up something like a germ, and then months later you discover that, well, I must have gotten that from X, Y, or Z.
I heard or read somewhere that you were influential to some younger painters in Paris when you were there. I'm wondering what it was like for you, sort of meeting French artists at that time.
Well, there were several other American painters that I knew, and then there were some French painters that I knew, and some Dutch and German and Swiss and other painters, and several of us were in the same gallery with Jean Fournier, Joan Mitchell, and Sam Francis, and in general, I think it was not, perhaps not as interesting as New York at the time, but I found it a very, very congenial place to live, and I'm afraid they're all gone now, Joan and Sam and others.
Did you keep many strong ties with any of the New York artists? I mean, there's a similar vein of what was going on globally, I think, in the productive art.
Yes, I had seen things in New York before I left, and because I was in and around New York until 1957 when I left, and then actually, that MoMA traveling show, the CIA show that that had a little bit of everything, and then they had the Reinhardt show, they had a Rothko show, they had a Franz Klein show, Barney Newman. By that time, France was beginning to see what had been done, and not simply look at magazine illustrations or anything like that. And there are also some painters that I found very interesting who were from an earlier generation. A painter named Bram van Velde, I find quite a wonderful painter, and I don't know if he's known here at all. I think I think it might be interesting to go to MoMA because I haven't been there for 14 years. And see, they have a new building and see what it's like. Yes. I remember I went to the opening of the building preceding, which for somebody like me who knew the old MoMA so thoroughly, with the Bauhaus and the stairway, and everything was in the same place. And then when I got there, everything was very different. And I ran into a friend and I said, "Maureen, where are we?" And she said, "I think we're in the airport in Stuttgart." So I think it's probably gotten even more so. They may have taken down the paintings that I particularly liked, but I don't. Not the classics, of course, not the Newmans and and the Rothkos and things like that. But I went to Joan Mitchell's painting is still hanging, or Bradley Walker Tomlin, who was a painter I loved as a student, you know. When I was a student, there wasn't much you could do with Rothko or Newman or people like that, but you could look at Motherwell or Tomlin or even Hans Hofmann and people like that and sort of do something. The others were simply a block to be admired, but you couldn't make, who would want to make a little Newman? Except Blinky Palermo. Sorry, I didn't mean that. I can't resist. I'm always talking too much.
No, not at all.
Saying too much.
You can get away with it.
Well, thank you. I think we'll invite you to walk through the exhibition. If you have further questions, we'll be here. James will be here. Feel free to come and ask him questions personally. So I'd like to give you
I just have one
Oh, sure.
In the other room, which is the painting that you are very fond of, and which is the one you think is odd?
It's about this big, if you'll recognize
The
it.
red and green one is that the fond one or the odd one?
I think both of those paintings are a little odd. More than anything else, except possibly the yellow painting at the end there.
They're wonderfully odd.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome. Thank you.